It began on one of those perfect spring mornings when everything in the neighborhood looked a little too clean, a little too trimmed, and far too perfect to be real. The sun hit the white vinyl fences just right, the lawns glowed like golf greens, and the air smelled faintly of fertilizer and fresh paint. It was the kind of neighborhood where people waved without meaning it, and gossip moved faster than the mail. The street was ruled unofficially by the HOA, and officially by Karen. Her full name was Karen Bishop, but everyone just called her Karen, as if it were a title. She wore pastel cardigans, carried a clipboard, and had a smile that looked more like a warning sign. She made it her mission to patrol the cul-de-sac each morning, hunting for violations. A recycling bin left out too long, a flower bed out of alignment, a car parked an inch too close to the curb, nothing escaped her gaze. Then I moved in. I wasn't exactly HOA material. I worked from home, liked to keep to myself, and didn't feel the need to join the endless parade of neighborhood barbecues and committee meetings. My yard was clean enough, my house was painted, and I paid my dues. But one thing stood out, my car. It wasn't just any car, it was a bright yellow Dodge Viper, loud, low, and unapologetically flashy. It purred like a beast when it started and growled when it moved. It didn't belong among the SUVs and sedans parked neatly in every driveway, and from the moment Karen saw it, she decided it was her problem. The first complaint came 2 days after I parked it in my driveway. She left a note tucked under the wiper blade. Your vehicle violates the community aesthetic standards. Please consider relocating it to your garage. The garage was already full, workbench, tools, and storage boxes, but that didn't matter to her. The Viper, gleaming in the morning light, became her personal target. Every time she walked by, she'd glare at it like it had personally offended her sense of order. At first, I ignored it. But Karen didn't stop. She filed an official complaint with the HOA board, claiming the car was too aggressive-looking and detracted from neighborhood harmony. She even took photos from different angles, as if documenting a crime scene. By the second week, she escalated. I'd see her pacing near the car, hands on hips, muttering under her breath. Once, she even tried to open the door, pretending to check if it was locked. I watched from my window, part disbelief, part curiosity. What exactly did she think she'd find? The neighbors began to notice too. Some whispered that Karen was obsessed. Others found it entertaining. A new chapter in the ongoing drama she created out of thin air. The HOA meetings turned tense, with her demanding action while the board tried to keep the peace. But things really took a turn one afternoon when I caught her standing just inches away from the Viper, her expression twisted in frustration. She had her phone out, recording. She circled the car like a vulture, filming every angle. Then, out of nowhere, she drew her foot back. It looked like she was actually going to kick it. She hesitated for a moment, looking around to make sure no one was watching. Then she swung her foot forward, not too hard, but enough to make contact. The dull thud echoed faintly through the quiet cul-de-sac. The sound didn't just come from metal, though. Something else answered. A sharp, unmistakable hiss. Karen froze. Her phone slipped from her hand. From beneath the car, a thin, dark shape slithered out, sleek, scaled, and moving with unnerving precision. Its head lifted slightly, tongue flicking in the air. A Viper! Karen stumbled backward, eyes wide with panic. For a moment, she stood there paralyzed, before letting out a strangled scream that shattered the calm morning. She bolted down the driveway, nearly tripping over her own shoes, waving her arms as if the snake were chasing her. The sound drew neighbors out onto their porches. Curtains twitched. Doors opened. Someone laughed. Someone else called out to ask what happened. Karen didn't stop running until she was halfway down the street, shouting something about a wild snake and a dangerous situation. I watched the whole thing unfold from the window, coffee in hand, stunned and slightly amused. I had no idea where the snake came from. It certainly wasn't mine, but there it was, coiled near the wheel of the car, basking in the sunlight like it owned the place. Animal control was called. The HOA board was notified. Karen demanded immediate extermination of the invasive creature, insisting that I was harboring wildlife. Within an hour, a small crowd gathered around the Viper. The animal control officer approached cautiously, but the snake didn't move. It wasn't attacking, It wasn't even coiled defensively anymore. It just sat there, as if enjoying the attention. When they finally caught it and took it away, Karen stood at a distance, clutching her phone, filming again. She looked triumphant, like she'd just defeated a villain. The HOA president tried to calm her down, assuring her it was just an unfortunate coincidence, but she wouldn't hear it. She called it a sign that the car didn't belong there. Later that evening, the neighborhood group chat lit up. People shared videos of Karen's reaction, memes, even snake emojis. Some said it was karma. Others joked that the car was defending itself. Karen, humiliated but furious, went quiet for a few days. But when Karen went quiet, it never meant peace. It meant planning. I didn't know it then, but the snake incident was just the beginning. She wasn't done. Not even close. What happened next would turn the calm, manicured neighborhood into a battlefield of petty revenge, fear, and escalating chaos. And it all started with one hiss. The week after the snake incident, the neighborhood buzzed like a hive that had just been kicked. Everyone had their version of the story, each more exaggerated than the last. Some swore the snake was enormous, others claimed it lunged at Karen, and a few insisted that I kept it as a pet to guard my car. The truth, an ordinary wild viper passing through, was far too boring for the HOA gossip mill. For a brief moment, I thought the chaos might fade. The HOA sent out a polite reminder about wildlife safety. The animal control report confirmed it was a random encounter, and the board seemed eager to move on. But Karen wasn't built to move on. When she finally reappeared, she did so with a vengeance. She began her mornings earlier, pacing the street in workout gear, pretending to jog while keeping a close eye on my driveway. Her clipboard reappeared, this time filled with notes and printed photos of my car. She'd circle things in red ink, muttering to herself. The other neighbors noticed. Some avoided her entirely, while others humored her out of politeness. But everyone knew she had found a new crusade. The first shot in her war came in the form of an HOA violation notice. It arrived folded neatly in my mailbox, marked urgent. The letter accused me of posing a safety hazard by attracting wildlife through improper vehicle maintenance. According to her logic, the snake had chosen my car because it was dirty, noisy, and vibrated excessively, simulating prey movement. It was absurd, but she was serious. A few days later, a petition appeared on the community bulletin board, titled Restore Harmony to Maple Grove Estates. It demanded that the HOA enforce stricter vehicle standards. Beneath the heading was a photo of my car, printed from one of her videos, with the snake circled dramatically in red. She had even added the caption, "This is what we're living with." Only 3 people signed it. One was Karen. The other 2 were her friends from the book club who agreed with anything she said as long as she poured them Chardonnay. Still, it was enough to cause tension. The HOA president, a mild-mannered man named Greg, tried to mediate. He called an emergency meeting to discuss the escalating concerns about neighborhood safety. Karen arrived first, armed with her binder of evidence and a slideshow on her iPad. I stayed home, watching from my window as cars parked one by one in front of the clubhouse. Inside, according to one neighbor who later filled me in, Karen went all in. She played the recording of her scream from that morning, dramatically reenacted her attack, and described my Viper as a magnet for danger. She even produced a pamphlet from a pest control company claiming they'd confirmed snakes were attracted to the scent of certain automotive fluids. The room was split between amusement and disbelief. But Greg, trying to keep order, suggested a compromise, a property inspection. Karen's eyes lit up. That was exactly what she wanted. 2 days later, she arrived with Greg and another board member for the official inspection. I stepped aside and let them look around. Everything was spotless. The driveway was clean, the lawn trimmed, the garage neatly organized. The car gleamed under the afternoon sun, spotless and silent. There was nothing to find. Karen wasn't satisfied. She crouched low, peering under the car, as if expecting another snake to slither out. When she found nothing, she frowned. "Sometimes," she muttered just loud enough for everyone to hear, "you can't see the problem until it strikes again." They left with no violations, but she wasn't deterred. That evening, as dusk settled, I noticed her outside again. She was holding her phone, pacing near the sidewalk, whispering into the camera. Later, the neighborhood Facebook group revealed what she was doing. She'd started filming a documentary about the so-called snake incident. She called it Predator on Maple Grove. Her video began with dramatic music and a montage of her evidence. She narrated the story like a true crime episode, pausing for effect as she described how she barely escaped with her life. The clip of her scream replayed twice in slow motion. The post spread quickly, mostly because everyone found it ridiculous. Some neighbors commented with laughing emojis. Others pointed out how calm the snake looked in her footage. But Karen didn't care about mockery. She cared about attention, and now she had it. Over the next few days, she doubled down. She placed warning snake activity signs near my driveway, claimed she saw something slithering in the bushes, and started leaving pest control pamphlets in mailboxes. The HOA removed the signs within hours, but she kept replacing them. Then one morning, the real escalation began. I woke up to the sound of scraping. Looking outside, I saw Karen crouched near the curb with a tape measure, marking distances on the pavement. Her car was parked nearby with the hazard lights blinking. She was measuring the exact length of my driveway and comparing it to HOA regulations, muttering something about overhang violations. When she noticed me watching, she straightened, gave a smug little nod, and took photos. By that afternoon, a new notice appeared on my door. Improper vehicle positioning, it read. According to her complaint, the front bumper of the Viper extended 2 inches beyond the permitted boundary. It was laughable, but effective. The HOA, bound by its own bureaucracy, had to investigate. Karen's confidence grew. She began talking louder, strutting past my house with her phone recording, claiming she was documenting ongoing safety risks. At one point, she even waved to the car and said, "Not today, snake," as if taunting it. But the universe has a cruel sense of humor. That evening, after a light rain, the air turned cool and damp, the kind of weather that brings small creatures out of hiding. When Karen made her nightly patrol, flashlight in hand, she approached the Viper again, ready to snap another set of photos. Then she froze. Beneath the car, half hidden in shadow, something moved. Another hiss, soft but unmistakable, broke the silence. Karen's flashlight shook as she stepped back, her breath quick and shallow. She whispered something into her phone, recording every moment, trying to convince herself she wasn't seeing what she thought she was. A moment later, she shrieked again, louder, longer, pure panic. The next morning, her footage was already circulating. This time, she claimed it was the same snake that had returned to terrorize the community. The HOA threat exploded. People debated whether it was real or another overreaction. Some even speculated she planted it herself for attention. No one knew the truth. But one thing was clear. Karen's obsession with my Viper had spiraled far beyond reason. And what she did next would turn her little crusade into a neighborhood scandal that no one could ignore. By the time the second snake video spread through the neighborhood group chat, Maple Grove Estates had turned into a full-blown circus. Everyone had an opinion, and none of them agreed. Some believed Karen had every right to be scared. Others accused her of faking the incident for attention. A few even joked that the snake must have moved in rent-free and should be added to the HOA roster. But for Karen, this wasn't funny anymore. It had become her crusade. She started every morning at dawn, standing in front of her house with a cup of tea, eyes locked on my driveway, as if expecting movement. Her porch light stayed on all night. She began wearing hiking boots and carrying a small whistle for protection. Neighbors walking their dogs crossed the street to avoid her, and the kids on bicycles whispered stories about the snake lady who patrolled the block. The HOA board, overwhelmed with complaints from both sides, finally called for an official hearing. The agenda: resident safety and property compliance, incident concerning 112 Maple Grove. My address. It was set for a Friday evening in the clubhouse, a beige building with a flagpole and a mural that read, "Community, Order, Harmony." 3 words that had long lost their meaning here. When I arrived, the parking lot was already full. People stood outside whispering, some recording with their phones. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. Folding chairs filled the room, and at the front sat the 5 board members behind a long table, looking as weary as teachers on the last day of school. Karen was there too, front and center, clutching a thick folder stuffed with printed screenshots and photographs. She wore a floral blouse and a strained smile that didn't reach her eyes. Beside her sat her two loyal supporters, nodding like bodyguards. Greg, the HOA president, cleared his throat and started the meeting. He read through the usual opening statements about civility and respectful discourse, which felt ironic considering half the neighborhood was there just for the drama. When it was Karen's turn to speak, she didn't waste a second. She rose dramatically, placed her folder on the table, and began what could only be described as a performance. According to her, my Viper was a catalyst for danger, a noise pollutant, and a visual disruption to community standards. She described both snake incidents in vivid detail, her voice trembling with righteous indignation. She showed printouts of the security footage, pausing at frames that caught her startled expression, using them as proof of the trauma she endured. Then came her evidence slideshow, complete with transitions, music, and captions. Each image of my car was zoomed in and highlighted, the snake circled in red with words like threat and hazard zone. The audience shifted between stifled laughter and disbelief. Greg tried to interrupt several times, reminding her to stick to facts, but she pressed on. "This isn't about one car," she said, pointing toward me. "This is about community safety. This is about accountability." When she finally finished, the room went quiet. Then a few people clapped sarcastically. Someone coughed to hide a laugh. Greg nodded politely before turning to me. My turn. There wasn't much to say. The official report from Animal Control was clear. 2 separate sightings, unrelated, both likely caused by the nearby marshland expanding after seasonal rain. The snake hadn't come from my car. It had simply passed through. But logic never stood a chance against Karen's imagination. She leaned forward, interrupting, claiming the official report was incomplete. She waved another piece of paper, an email from a local pest control company suggesting that snakes can be drawn to warmth beneath stationary vehicles. She treated it like a smoking gun. The board listened patiently, taking notes, while the rest of the room buzzed with amusement. By now, the hearing had turned into a neighborhood event. Even the teenagers had shown up, whispering jokes in the back row. When Greg called for order, he sighed heavily. "We appreciate your concerns, Karen," he said, choosing his words carefully. "But based on the evidence, there's no violation or cause for enforcement. The matter is considered closed." Karen froze. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she hadn't processed what she'd just heard. Closed. After all her effort? The gavel tapped once. Decision final. Case dismissed. But Karen didn't leave quietly. As people began filing out, she stood, her voice shaking but loud. "You're making a mistake," she said. "This neighborhood is in danger, and when something happens, don't say I didn't warn you." The room fell silent. Greg muttered something about moving forward, but Karen was already storming out, binder clutched tight against her chest. That night, Maple Grove's group chat exploded again. Someone uploaded a clip of her speech, titling it Karen versus the HOA. It went semi-viral among local circles. The comments ranged from sympathy to mockery. She became both a joke and a warning, a figure of ridicule and self-importance wrapped into one. The next morning, she didn't come outside. For the first time in weeks, her driveway was empty. The street felt unusually calm. A few neighbors joked that the snake must have scared her away for good. But calm never lasted long in Maple Grove. A few days later, new flyers appeared taped to mailboxes and lampposts. The headline read, "The snake is still out there." Beneath it, a blurry photo of what might have been a shadow under my car and a warning to stay vigilant. She was back. And this time she wasn't relying on the HOA. She'd taken matters into her own hands. That evening, while the neighborhood was winding down, I saw her again. She was crouched in the bushes near my driveway, wearing a headlamp and rubber gloves, setting something on the ground. I couldn't see what it was, but she moved with deliberate care, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds. When she finally walked away, I stepped outside. There, near my front tire, were small white pellets, mothballs, scattered across the pavement. The sharp chemical smell filled the air. A few hours later, I checked again. More pellets, a small cardboard box half hidden under a bush, and next to it, A motion-activated wildlife camera, its red light blinking faintly. Karen had turned my driveway into her personal surveillance zone. The next morning, Greg received at least 5 new complaints, this time from other neighbors, furious about the smell and the sight of the cameras. The HOA warned her to stop trespassing, but she ignored it. She was convinced she was protecting the community. Then came the storm. A heavy rain hit that night, pounding the streets and flooding the gutters. The mothballs dissolved, the cameras short-circuited, and by morning, the smell of chemicals lingered thick in the air. Karen's yard, directly across from mine, was littered with debris. The rain had washed everything downhill onto her lawn. When she came outside and saw the mess, her scream echoed down the block. She stood in her slippers, hair frizzed from the humidity, staring at the soggy white film coating her front yard. The neighbors watched from behind curtains, pretending not to. The next day, Greg sent out another official notice. Not to me, but to her. Unauthorized tampering with another resident's property, it read. Immediate compliance required. Karen's reign of control was slipping. Her reputation was cracking, but the story wasn't over, because a few nights later something happened that no one could explain. The motion light above my garage flicked on at 2 a.m. Shadows moved in the beam. Then a sound, low, sharp, unmistakable, a hiss. By morning, half the neighborhood was talking again. Someone claimed to have seen something slither near the fence line. Others said they heard Karen screaming in the middle of the night. No one could prove what happened. But by sunrise, Karen's front yard was empty, her car gone, her blinds closed. And just like that, the street fell silent again. For a moment, it felt like peace. But the story of Karen and the Viper wasn't finished. The quiet was just the calm before the final unraveling, one that would make the snake incidents look tame. For 2 days, Karen vanished. No morning patrols, no clipboard, no shrill voice echoing across Maple Grove. Her blinds stayed shut, her porch light burned through the night, and her driveway sat empty. Some neighbors joked that she'd finally given up and moved away. Others whispered that she was plotting something bigger. Everyone waited to see which was true. Then, on the 3rd morning, her car returned, a silver SUV, spotless and freshly waxed. She stepped out wearing dark sunglasses and a determined expression. There was no wave, no small talk, just quiet, focused purpose. Whatever had happened during those 2 days, she came back changed. By evening, she was at it again, walking slow laps around her property, taking photos, glancing at my driveway every few minutes. But there was something different this time. She wasn't frantic or flustered. She was calm. Too calm. The air that week was heavy with humidity, the kind that made the neighborhood feel tense and still. The crickets were louder than usual, and even the dogs seemed restless. The quiet stretched long into the nights, until the night everything boiled over. It started just after midnight. The motion sensor on my driveway flicked on, flooding the pavement with light. At first I thought it was just a raccoon, but then I saw her, Karen. She was crouched low near my Viper, a spray bottle in one hand and a rag in the other. She looked around nervously, then began wiping the car's front bumper. It didn't take long to realize she wasn't cleaning. It looked more like she was applying something. Some kind of oily residue that glistened under the light. I watched from my window, half in disbelief, half in amusement. She'd completely lost it. Then, without warning, she froze. Her head jerked up, eyes wide. Something moved under the car. It was subtle at first, a faint rustle, then a soft, dragging sound. Karen took a hesitant step back, peering into the shadows. She raised the flashlight and swept the beam across the pavement. Nothing, just silence. Then, another hiss, low, cold, alive. Karen gasped and stumbled backward. The flashlight dropped from her hand, rolling across the driveway. The light caught a brief flash of scales before the beam blinked out. She turned to run, but slipped on the wet concrete, crashing to the ground with a scream that echoed through the entire street. Within seconds, porch lights flicked on, curtains parted, and doors opened. The neighborhood came alive. I ran outside just as she scrambled to her feet, breathing hard, one hand clutching her chest. She pointed wildly toward the car, shouting something about the cursed snake and the devil's machine. Her voice cracked with panic, but there was no snake this time. Nothing moved beneath the viper, no sign of life, just the faint shimmer of whatever she'd sprayed and the echoes of her own hysteria. Neighbors gathered quickly, half concerned, half curious. Greg arrived too, still in pajamas, his face etched with exhaustion. He tried to calm her down, but Karen wouldn't stop. She was trembling, eyes darting between me, the car, and the shadows beneath it. Finally, she turned on me. "You brought this," she screamed. "You and that thing! You cursed this neighborhood!" Her words hung in the air, heavy and strange. Even the onlookers shifted uncomfortably. Greg raised a hand, firm but tired. "That's enough," he said. "You're trespassing, Karen." She blinked at him as if the word didn't register. Then her shoulders slumped. The fight drained from her face. Without another word, she turned and walked back to her house, leaving behind the rag, the spray bottle, and a stunned crowd. By morning, the story was everywhere. Someone had filmed the entire scene, her sneaking onto my driveway, the screaming, the collapse. The video spread faster than anything before. The caption read, "HOA Queen meets her match. The Viper strikes again." Within hours, it had thousands of views. Comments poured in from across the city. Some mocked her. Others defended her. But the consensus was clear. Karen had become a local legend, the living embodiment of suburban chaos. The HOA tried to contain the fallout, issuing a statement about an unfortunate misunderstanding and respecting boundaries. But it was too late. Her reputation was beyond repair. 2 days later, a moving truck appeared in her driveway. No one saw her pack. No one saw her leave. By sunset, her house sat empty, the blinds still drawn. The porch light, once her symbol of vigilance, was finally off. The neighborhood exhaled. For the first time in months, Maple Grove felt quiet again. Peaceful. But there was one last detail. A week after she moved out, the HOA held its regular meeting. It was brief and calm, no drama for once. As people were leaving, Greg pulled me aside. He looked uneasy, almost hesitant. "Funny thing," he said quietly. "Maintenance went through Karen's yard today. You'll never guess what they found." Behind her garage, hidden beneath a tarp, was a small plastic tank, the kind used for terrariums. Inside was a cracked heat lamp, a shallow water dish, and a few old reptile shed skins. It looked like it hadn't been touched in weeks. No one could prove anything, but the implication was clear. Karen's snake problem might not have been a coincidence after all. The rumor spread quickly, then quietly faded, as most things did in Maple Grove. The house was listed for sale a month later, cleaned up and staged with fake plants and soft lighting. A young couple bought it within days, blissfully unaware of its history. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be in a place where perfection was just a thin mask over constant tension. The lawns grew lush again, the HOA emails slowed down, and people smiled a little easier when they passed each other. But sometimes, late at night, when the street was empty and the motion light flicked on for no reason, I'd think about Karen, about the way she stared at that car like it was alive, about the faint hiss that only she seemed to hear, and every once in a while, when the wind was still, I could swear I heard it too, soft, distant, somewhere near the wheels. A hiss, not loud enough to scare me, just enough to remind me that some things never really leave. Because in Maple Grove Estates, peace was always temporary, and some stories, like snakes, had a way of coming back.